Duncan from RiderChoices. I wanted to take a moment to introduce this video because it turned out to be a really wonderful time. Last night on 30 September 2020, we had Tribe Talk Happy Hour that included a guest from Australia, a man by the name of Duncan McRae. And why this is important is Duncan has a unique set of skills with road safety and extensive experience across all aspects of driver, but more importantly, motorcycle safety. He's provided advice in Australia for Australian roads, Victoria, Australia roads, New South Wales Center for Road Safety, Transport Accident Commission for the state of Victoria in Australia, and has done a prodigious amount of research in looking at ways to make riding a motorcycle safety in the country of Australia. So last night turned into just a great experience where everybody was able to ask Duncan some pointed questions. And the one thing that comes across in all of this is how similar motorcyclists in Australia and rider coaches and instructors in Australia are very similar to the ones here in the United States. Many challenges that are the same, successes that seem to be the same. So it's a really great evening listening to people talk and learning from others from around the world. So I invite you to watch this video, 2 hours worth of conversation with Duncan McRae from Australia on a very interesting Tribe Talk Happy Hour.
Good evening, all.
Duncan, good to see you, my friend.
G'day, mate. How are you going?
I'm going rather well. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Duncan McRae from Australia.
Hi. I specially picked a local scene for a background so you can feel the mood.
Wonderful. I apologize for being just a little bit late. They decided to update the software again, but it seems to be working a little bit better.
Don't worry, you're only 14 hours behind.
That's right. Everybody's so quiet tonight.
I was just about to complain about that myself.
You of all people.
What?
I'm running late tonight. I'm just getting started on dinner.
Well, that's the beauty of happy hour. It's
Me too,
all
Nicole.
here all the time.
Me too, Nicole. I'm an hour ahead of you, Nicole.
I think he who complains about it being too quiet in here needs to decide what we're going to talk about first.
Oh, really?
That would have been you, Don.
I was thinking it was you. Maybe I misheard it.
You must have. All right, I'll start the ball rolling. What the heck? What have I got to lose, right? I'm ready for retirement, so who cares, right?
Exactly.
Hey, how about we talk about a rider coach instructor program, training program, candidates to preload them and just have MSF come in and test them.
Well, that's pretty great.
Wow, it got even quieter.
So you mean that there would be like no hands-on for coach candidates with a rider coach trainer?
Pretty much. It would be something that as we go through the front loading process, which we normally should go through anyway, we'd have them introduce exercises, introduce simulated practices, introduce simulated practice demos, that kind of thing, even ride demos. They wouldn't do any coaching, but they would also hang with the coaches to get a better feel of what could be coached and see how the students react and that sort of thing. And then just have MSF come in and test them on a 3-day weekend. You could do it with anywhere from, I'm thinking 4 to 6, maybe 8 candidates, thereby making the courses smaller. And depending upon how well your rider coach candidates were prepared, they could even do the whole student teaching phase, or you could have a couple of 1 or 2 of your regular rider coaches come in and switch, do exercises so that they would have a break to be mentored by the rider coach trainers, and at the end of the day, see how they did.
Would you be willing to accept the final verdict of the guest tester?
Hell no, I trained them. I know how good they are. No, seriously. And along the way, I mean, we have how many trainers in our states? They could be monitored. They could actually be monitored or mentored by rider coach trainers as we go along. We have like 3 trainers in our state, and they're not that far away. They could come in for a day to monitor them ahead of time. It could be something that, living document, trying to figure it out as we go along. But they could come in on Friday, go review the rider coach guide in the morning, give them their knowledge test, have them demonstrate and peer teach specific exercises in the afternoon like they normally do, and then give them their skill eval before they leave. And Saturday, Sunday, student teaching. Okay, I've laid it out there. What do you think?
Who's paying?
Who always pays?
The site.
Well, that depends on your state.
Oh, now we're wearing depends.
Well, it always has to be depending on your state. But the
It does.
fact of the matter is that it would reduce the number of days and expense that the sites/states would need to put out for the 8-day rider coach prep. We would also be getting more locally trained people, so they would be more familiar with, and of course we'd have to train them according to MSF standards, but they would, in this new day and age where people are having time constraints, trying to find someone to commit to 8 days over a week or 2 weekends or even three weekends can be a little challenging. Next.
But if they can't commit to 8 days or 3 consecutive 3-day weekends or whatever your schedule might be, then how are they going to ever be committed to putting in the work as a rider coach to actually get good and then teaching classes?
They're actually, just like they would be now, front loading. I mean, I'm sure that most people, most sites who front load their people very well have training sessions, have more observation sessions. And in some places where it could be afforded, it could actually be a paid position, not necessarily paid as a rider coach, but as a candidate, having them, at least cover some of their expenses to come in and be in the learning mode. There would have to be guidelines to make sure that they observe / perform certain number of hours or number of exercises or number of days, et cetera, to ensure that they were prepared. Because if they're not going to put that time commitment up front, then you'll weed them out along the way, and you won't have to spend the money on the 8-day rider coach prep.
Duncan, I would be interested in you sharing with us how your instructors are selected and trained down under.
Well, first of all, they have to be breathing.
Oh, when they introduced that criteria. So I was just listening to the conversation and getting on the same page, and it seems, I know, Don, you and I have conversed over email about our different systems, and there's alarming similarities. And I say alarming similarities because there's some assumptions that I see that both the US and Australia make. And I think I need to, before I explain our system, go back to a basic principle. We've got a person who wants to enter a career path. Now, if you wanted to become an electrician or a plumber or any trade or any career, a doctor, a lawyer, you would pay for your learning. And I believe that that's something we need to always keep in mind here, because everybody learns at a different rate. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to become a motorcycle coach, for some people that process might take 3 months, others it might take 3 years. And my experience has been that, the time it takes doesn't necessarily reflect on the quality of the person. One of the best coaches I've ever had took over a year to reach their final accreditation. Yet another coach I know that rushed the process in under a month, left the scheme very quickly, didn't continue. So essentially the process we have in Australia is there's a prerequisite, a criteria you must meet. You must have held a full unrestricted motorcycle license for 3 of the last 4 years. You have to be over the age of 21, need to go through a series of tests, which include a 90-question road rule test that you must get 95% correct. And then you need to do all the courses, the learner course, the pre-license course as a student. So you go through those prerequisites, and then you attend a week-long instructor training program, which is delivered by the training centre that you intend to coach at. So that's the, if you like, formal part of the education. But after that instructor program, people begin a shadowing process. Some people call it ghosting, where essentially, if I was a trainee coach, I would basically become a sidekick of a senior coach and just gradually take on more activity. So if I started, I might be comfortable with delivering maybe a talk on protective clothing. So that might be the first thing I might deliver.
Okay.
And then I might ride a couple of demonstrations, like maybe a nice easy demonstration, like a slow ride demonstration or a maneuvering. And then as I gain in confidence of being in front of a group, and as I develop my riding skills, and as I get feedback from the mentor that I'm under, I'll take on more tasks. So I'll get to the point where I'm comfortable to deliver the entire course, both the theory components and the practical components. And at that point, when I'm fully comfortable, I'll say to my mentor, give me a mock assessment. So that the mentor then does a full assessment as if they were the regulator. And if they pass that on behalf of the organisation, then they basically advise the regulator and say, okay, we'd like a formal assessment done on this candidate. So it varies in length a lot depending on how much time, effort, commitment people are prepared to put into shadowing. And that, as I say, can take weeks or months or even longer.
Okay, well, here's two things that are different about our system by comparison to what you're saying then. Two things I want to bring up. One, it sends a very mixed message when we reach out and say, oh, hey, we really need rider coaches. You should totally be a rider coach. We're thinking about it. Why don't you come join us? We need it. And we do need rider coaches. And then we get them through all, get them hyped up, and we've built this energy for them. And we say, okay, cool. Now, if you could just give us this amount of money, and then we'll give you your training. Okay, the response to that, personally, my coaching was state funded. All right, so I was brought in and all of my materials were handed to me, and I stuck with it. I wanted this. But the whole idea of we need you, could you please give us some money first, is always going to be a little bit weird. The second thing is, okay, by the way, hi everybody. I just landed in Texas, and what you're talking about shadowing down here is what we call it. And shadowing in Texas is, I've got this class, you're going to be my shadow. I show up and I do all the work right out the gates. I'm doing all of their work for them. They're taking my paycheck home. So that's it's not phasing in. There's no pay involved. It's all just, you're going to do everything. I'm going to sit here in this chair and make sure you can do it well enough, even though you're already an MSF trained instructor. Good luck. Thank you for the free day. So it's not identical, man. And honestly,
what I'll say, Robin, is it's not identical to that in every state in the U.S. either. So
totally fair point.
Context here, and the second part of that would be that, it's dependent upon the position you're taking. When Duncan was talking about it from a professional perspective, there are very few professional rider coaches per capita in the United States. Most of us do this as a hobby. Very rarely will you make enough money to survive off of it. And so it's good to keep that in mind. And we've previously, Duncan, talked about trying to make this professional, and it just doesn't jive well with our conditions here in the U.S.
So exactly the same, because of the amount of people that want training on a weekend, and so you've got a huge demand that's weekend only, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Exception to that is some of our military sites run, all the time.
my question for Duncan was just about exactly that, Don. Does the process that you put these people through, they become it's a full-time position, or is it still a part-time position?
I think in terms of full-time and part-time, our percentage is probably very, very close to you. There are very few full-time rider coaches in Australia. The vast majority are doing weekend work, and probably only 3 out of 4 weekends, because we all need breaks as humans, and they've got other jobs, be it professions. The interesting comment by Robin about a cost up front, there's no actual upfront cost in this process, because the training provider who's running the initial training course does that for the people that they've invited onto the course. So there's no money outlay, but at the same time, people aren't getting paid for the process. So they're putting in their own time and their own weekends at their own cost, but they're not having to front up with, you know, $2,000 on day one to commence the process. So it's,
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. That's a wonderful thing. It's like, hey, welcome, here's your training, but you're doing this of your own accord. You're going to have to want it, you know.
and some organisations actually say we want you to commit to doing a year's work with us if we're going to expend this expense, and they kind of indenture them if you understand that process. Kind of like going in the military and saying, okay, we expect you to give us this time.
What does everybody think about having to pay some kind of fee up front to get buy-in to show that this is really what you would like to do? Because there's a lot of people that don't pay up front, and so they have no skin in the game. If they don't like it, they walk away, and the people who have invested time, money, curriculum materials, clothing, whatever, they walk away, and the person who's left holding the bag is a person who was trying to get them through the program in the first place. So what about an upfront little something something to make it more meaningful, to show the motivation?
Yeah, I've had really disastrous luck with having little to no upfront cost. So I don't mind charging a fair amount for the class, but I do see to it that the coaches are paid back as rapidly as possible once they've completed the class. But yeah, trying to go the zero fee or the just pay the $100 to cover all your materials things, I've had really, really, really poor results going that way.
Chris, I know you're in here. Are there any state regulations about whether you can charge coach candidates for the prep or not for you guys?
Who were you asking, Laura? Oh,
Do you have a state stipulation that says anything about whether you can charge candidates for prep or not?
In New York, there is no tuition cost for the candidates. However, there has been nothing said that that we could not take a deposit and pay them back over the first few courses, or if they decide not to do it, then they get their deposit back. But they are not charged for the actual tuition for the Rider Coach Prep.
I think the typical candidates we get are older, probably financially secure. They're doing this because they like motorcycles. So a financial commitment means less than a time commitment. Say, set up the pre-qualification test at a given date, and they have to pass that to secure a slot. And that would show a time commitment and a skin in the game.
So Dave, at that point, do they already have a rider coach guide and everything that they use to study from for that?
Yeah, they get a rider coach guide to study from. And then if they fail, they, just like in the prep, they turn it back in.
We do tuition both ways. There's some providers that will sponsor, will pay the full ride for the coaches, and some providers will require that the candidates pay. So we work both ways. I did want to make two other comments. One was, last week I brought up the issue of points, license points for rider coach candidates. I did find out that we're not the Wild West out here. We actually do check abstracts every year on the state level. And with that out of the way, to Ron, how would the overall qualitative assessment work if the MSF only comes in for 3 days, where these students have actually had a 8 or 9 day prep, I assume? So how could the how would qualitative assessment fit in with the MSF just coming in for that final exam, as you put it?
Okay. Well, in my opinion, and humble as it is, They come in for the Monday, Friday to do the review the Rider Coach Guide, take their knowledge test. Then in the afternoon, they would do they would peer teach some exercises, the ones that MSF would determine as essential, and then take their skill eval. And then just as in the student teaching phase of the Rider Coach Prep, they would teach specific or all, depending upon how many candidates there were, switching in and out to perform the teaching of the exercises.
I understand that part, but there's my understanding of the overall qualitative assessment could be instances and events that follow that occur from the minute the prep opens until the minute the prep ends. And I only bring that up too because of going through a trainer prep where we lost a very, in my opinion, a pretty qualified trainer candidate on the very last day at a very awkward moment. And I'm just not sure that the MSF only seeing the 3 days, the final 3 days, aren't seeing the overall picture. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make.
That could very well be, okay, Rick, that could very well be. However, as Robin stated, we need coaches. It is very difficult, especially now with this pandemic. I tried to do 40 courses with 8 coaches since the 1st of July. Many coaches are aging out. Some of them didn't want to teach because of COVID. It's going to be very difficult next year to try to do a full schedule, if we can, with fewer rider coaches and trying to get people involved. Am I trying to dilute the process? Not really, but I believe that with the front loading guidelines that could be initiated. Now, and again, this is not replacing the 8-day prep. This is an alternative too for those sites that have the wherewithal to initiate a program that would help this be done.
Duncan, what's the age range of your typical coaches?
I was just going to ask exactly the question. I'm wondering if you're a little psychic there.
It could be.
I was listening to Ron. We were in a very similar situation where we have an aging workforce. We have a lot of motorcyclists above 50 and a lot of coaches that are very close, if not already retired. And we have been trying to encourage younger guys and girls into motorcycle coaching with some success. We've got a few shining lights across various states that are, I'm sounding really old here, but in the under 30 basket. And I mean, it's clearly evident that the students have a lot more rapport with those younger coaches that are closer to their age group. And we get a lot of good feedback from the customers that they really like, Mary or John or whoever. And I think there's that energy that only youth brings, that really teaching motorcycles is a very physically, mentally demanding job. And I think we forget. I mean, those of us who've been doing it for 20 years forget what it's like to be fresh behind the ears and wet behind the ears and new to it. And seeing young coaches with that enthusiasm is like they're putty that you just want to mold and develop. And we're trying to get more young people into it and with limited success. But I think now we've got, particularly with COVID, massive increase in unemployment, a lot of places closing down, and now motorcycle enthusiasts are coming to training centres and saying, I'm interested in being a coach, because it will be a little bit of additional income that I need to maintain my mortgage or to support my family or whatever, particularly a young family. So I think we need to seize the advantage, like the benefits of what's coming our way. I think we can try and make some good things happen out of COVID, dare I say it. And one of those things might be to get young people more into the profession.
That's
Duncan, the way, sorry,
no, yeah, Nicole, you're up.
Duncan, the way you said that about instructor age relative to student age makes it sound like you might have a younger student population than we experience here. What does your student age tend to be like?
Across all jurisdictions, the average is early 30s. So we do, and I say average, if you attend any course on any day, you will see, certainly you'll see a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds doing training, but you will also see 45 and 50-year-olds. But I still think a 40-year-old is very happy to take training from a 30-year-old coach. I don't see. I just watch the interaction. I think it's just the people skills that are taught these days in schools, the communication skills. I think they make really good coaches.
Okay, so somebody just posted what might attract more coaches. So I was thinking that, Duncan, I'd like to ask you personally what your opinion is, what your take is on if we're having difficulty saying, hey, sign up on the dotted line and give us a little bit of cash here. There are plenty of people that are not doing well enough to be able to front that. What is your take on what collateral, just like dedication collateral can we take from somebody who might be interested in signing up for such a tedious weekend,
Look, I think for a lot of young guys and girls, the carrot that gets them into it is that there's a variety of work, and predominantly if there's access to track days at racetracks. And so those organisations that run advanced training at facilities like Eastern Creek Raceway, they often...
See, Donald Green already knows that I'm all over that, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut and let everybody else discuss it.
Yeah, that's often the front door and the motivator, and the same if they're in the off-road space as well. If they're into adventure riding, and they're connected to that dirt bike scene. I think, I've always been lucky in the motorcycle training career in that I've always had a variety of work. I think if you're just teaching absolute beginners who have never touched a motorcycle and you're doing that day in, day out for, 7 days a week or whatever, it's very demanding, it's fatiguing, and it results in burnout. And the instructors that come in because there's a motivator of other activities like teaching at racetracks or teaching at higher levels, that's a big motivator. And I think also giving that diversity of work and having different products that you can offer students, not just products that are done at a training centre, but on-road products. And there has been a bit more of a push, certainly in the last few years in Australia, to get more on-road coaching out there because it's got a lot more validity in terms of, practical use for everyday riding. Don't know if that answered your question though.
Yeah, man. No, it does. It answers it well. It's sort of like saying, like, look, the motorcycle community has a variety of different outlets that could really use input if you're able to transition to a certain boundaries that allow you to maintain only the safest message. And that can be at 180 miles an hour, which a lot of kids are like, oh, how do I do that? Because who knows why? Who knows why we get into all that stuff. We did talk a little bit about it before, but the idea that, you can do fast things or you can do slow things really well, whatever it is, we need somebody to start conveying a better message about that while giving instruction on how to do it properly. That's not bad. That's good bait. It's still, the guys are not wrong. Businesses are going under because they can't acquire what is necessary to train the group. I get that that's hard. I also don't care. People, if we need coaches, we can't be advertising it based on whether or not they can pay. That's not a tagline to a long message. I am absolutely indifferent to that, but a solution does need to be found. So I hope that as loud and proud as that message may sound, I'm not even a trainer, so I should probably stand down.
No, we do get a lot of people come into the business through motorcycling clubs, various enthusiast groups. Now, be it a sports bike riding group or an off-road riding group, or there is some connection to a group setting that is tapped into. So I suspect that's no different to your environment either.
Very similar, very similar. We have one extra that would be like, we definitely have our American cruiser crowd, and hats off to them, because some of the stuff I see them doing in slow speed maneuvers, lock and lean type competition, it's amazing to me. So it's not what I do, but to get that click, the whole series of clicks involved, we all need one language that will bring in the garden variety opportunist coach that's going to stick around at an early age. I'm lucky that my employers are significantly younger than me, so I get to be irresponsible, and I'm drinking whiskey. Go on.
Hey, Robin, first of all, it doesn't matter that you're not a trainer. What you're adding to the conversation is extremely important. And if it gets overwhelming, I'll let you know.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I do
No,
feel like I don't want to come on too strong.
No, we're all rider coaches at heart, and that's important. That I can't emphasize it enough that we have these conversations because we are rider coaches. Some of us may be trainers. Who cares? The bottom line is, we're more similar than we are different, and we have the same passions that keep us coming here. And so, don't ever say you shouldn't speak up. I'll let you know if you speak up too much. And by the way, it's great that you don't sound like Max Headroom tonight.
Hey, man, I'm in Texas. We're almost there. We are almost to Kerrville, which is where we'll be staying for 3 months, coaching out of Austin, possibly Houston too. So, yeah, I've got internet. Now, one cell phone does the job in Texas that 5 couldn't.
That's awesome. So
I might make a.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Yeah, might make another comment about the recruitment of coaches. I've found that in terms of getting a coach that sticks with you and is a high quality, it always seems to be the person who's a good communicator / teacher rather than an expert rider. And I've often said I'd rather get a poor rider who's a good teacher and turn them into a coach rather than get a good rider and turn them into an educator. I've worked with a number of world champions, and they can't put their words together. They are really terrible in front of a group, and they're terrible explaining things. Yet I've worked with primary school teachers who are used to teaching 10-year-olds, and they're fantastic motorcycle instructors. So I think it's who we ask in the first place. I think the front door, we tend to let people in who've got demonstrate really good riding skills, whereas we should be looking for people who have got great communication skills and teaching and education and those sort of personal skills.
So the next question I had for you, Duncan, I'm sorry, you just seem to be the special guy tonight. And it's great to get all the insight from somewhere else. And what I'm realizing is we're not very much different. It seems we have the same issues, the same problems, the same challenges, and the same successes to a certain extent. And so if I don't mention it now, I may forget it later. So thank you for giving us your take on this. It's really important to share such things.
Yeah, and also thanks for inspiring me to imagine Guy Martin as an MSF instructor.
So my next question is, have you had an increase of motorcycles?
I don't know. I was all right. Next, you turn, Bob.
Sorry, I missed the question, Don.
No problem. Have you had an increase of motorcycle sales in Australia over COVID?
Quite the opposite. Well, sorry, let me go back. Over COVID, yes, but leading up to COVID, the industry's been having a big drop. In fact, the industry has been sort of asking a lot of questions around what's caused this in the last 2-3 years, this massive move away from motorcycling, and COVID's kind of, dare I say it, it's early days in COVID. We're tracking the trends both in sales but also in fatalities. COVID's shown us about a 6% reduction in motorcycle trauma. Yeah. So we've had a 6% reduction in both crashes and serious injury in motorcycling across Australia. About a 20% reduction in motor vehicle, as in cars. What is scary under COVID is that we've had a 70% increase in push bicycle injury and collisions. And that, I think's a pretty common theme around the world, that there's a lot of people taking to push bikes as a COVID alternative, because we've had a lot of people move away from public transport. There's a huge fear of that. So that's resulted in the roads being congested. That's resulted in more people trying to take push bikes. That's also increased a slight increase of take up of motorcycles. There has definitely been an increase in people seeking training and getting a license. But of course, there's a lag between when you get your license and then when you go out and spend your money on your first motorcycle. And what we've always found, there's in pretty well across the eastern seaboard in Australia, we've got graduated driver licensing for motorcycling, where the learner course to get your learner's permit is actually mandatory by law. And then you have a period on your learners, and then to progress to your probationary or provisional license, you need to do another course. And what we find is that there's a significant drop off between that learner course and the probationary course, about a 60% drop off. So it's interesting. A lot of people dip their toe in the water and have a little dabble, and for whatever reason, they think it's a good idea, but then after the learner course, they go, oh, look, it's not for me. And maybe it is that they haven't got access to a motorcycle to learn on, because we have a what's called a learner approved motorcycle scheme, where you can only ride on your learner license a small capacity bike or low powered bike. So yes, there's been an increase of training over COVID, a slight increase of sales. But I think as it drags on, and dare I say it, I think COVID will drag on for 12, 18 months, I don't know. But I think we're now sort of realising that we need to rethink our whole transport strategy. That was a long answer.
But a good one. But a good one.
I might, whilst we're talking training and change, I think one of the things that's certainly happening in the training space is we're seeing a lot of people, because of COVID, who traditionally wouldn't have got into motorcycling. And every time I've seen that over the years, and I started motorcycle training in early 80s, what I find is that we have a large increase in incidences during training, because if you like, you're getting more people who are, well, let's say they're not very good at doing up their own shoelaces. And that has a bit of a knock-on effect in that, people start hearing stories about, oh, something happened at a training course or whatever. So I think when we get in these periods of a lot of real novices coming into training, we need to be particularly diligent with who we're putting in front of learners. As a coach, we almost need to make sure that we're always, if possible, getting our top shelf coach out at the coalface to teach at these courses, because you know, a lot of people assume that, you know, a beginner course is an easier course to teach, but I would actually argue it's by far the hardest course. And I think, you know, your new coaches, you should be putting on courses where the people have developed those basic skills, and you're basically refining them.
Very interesting. Great input. Greatly appreciated. So who else has questions, ideas, thoughts?
Don, this is Dennis from St. Louis. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good, Dennis.
First of all, yeah, I got in here kind of late, but also noticed the subject matter appears to be getting new coaches coming in and retaining them. One of the statements made was about better wages. I don't know what the wages are around other parts of the country, but where I live in the metropolitan St. Louis area, as well as Illinois, the prevailing wage is somewhere in the neighborhood of $375 to $404.25 for the weekend. I don't know if that's better or worse than some of the other sites, but to me, it's not always the pay that makes a difference. It's the dedication that the coach has doing the job. I've been doing this 18 years and I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. Like in Texas, where I just got to Texas, they are state mandated, only allowed to charge so much for a class, or charge a student for a class, or some. I don't remember how it works. I don't even whatever. But getting a good coach to sign up to become a coach was a key ingredient and all that. And from our stance as coaches with experience, and I've got what, 6 years, I don't know, convincing somebody based on our opinion of what they should care about in order to become a coach isn't necessarily the fuel that's going to build the coach that they could be and get them to sign up. You know, hey, you should do it for your dedication. Right now is a time when money is an issue. So it's at least an ingredient that can fall out of the sky that you can bring up. Hey, well, there's pay in it, you know. One particular take. Bottom line, apparently we need them, and they aren't enough.
I think motorcycling, unfortunately, is one of those professions that will always have poor pay. I've tried over the years to try and increase pay levels across, you know, the areas that I work, and the problem is that it's always perceived as a fun job, and any job, I think any job where you're caring for others or looking after areas, whether child care or nursing or any of those professions, people tend to take advantage of that and pay low wages. I think very few people understand the level of stress and responsibility a motorcycle coach can be under in delivering a course to novice riders. But I think in terms of retaining people, I mentioned earlier about the value of having diversity of what you deliver for them. So if they're teaching a various range of courses, not just the one program. But I think there's some other things that respect and recognition are probably on the top of my list. I think as a manager of coaches, if you've got coaches under you, you need to spend the time and have those conversations and actually let them know how much you actually respect what they do and value what they do. Because I think a lot of us, you know, if you've been out there all day and it's let's say it's a 90-degree, 100-degree day and the bitumen's melting and the bike side stands are sinking into the ground, and you come out off that training range and you've had a bunch of students that are really giving you a hard time, and the boss just grunts at you, then you're not going to want to come back tomorrow. And the same if it's a pouring day and it's the middle of winter and, you know, you're wet right through and it's disgusting. You know, I think if you respect and recognise and also look at all those opportunities. When I ran my own training school, we had a sponsorship for helmets. And so I was able to regularly provide my instructors with new helmets and other gear that for their own personal riding. And so those little I know they're trinkets like a new pair of gloves or something like that. All those little things just help and tell people that it's actually a human job. And I think that's really important.
And I think a lot of the employees know, they understand that the next level up, whoever's running the show there, they know the struggle. They don't have firsthand experience with it. They just know that their bosses, you're cutting down legions of problems for them so they can actually do the job that they're doing. I will assure you that most of us get that. And there was something else that made me laugh about that, but I forgot what it was. Oh, yeah, I don't remember. Whatever. But yeah, continue.
Ron, you got your hand up.
Duncan, the next question is, what advancement opportunities do you have down there? Are they pretty much the same as we have here, from rider coach to rider coach trainer to potentially QA, or is there something in between that they can aspire to?
To be honest, Ron, I think that the advancements is possibly less. As I say, most training centres deliver at least 3 products, and so most trainers will commence just delivering one of those, and as they get more experience, then take on learners, and then possibly take on some more advanced training. There are very, very, very few full-time jobs in the industry. Let's pick a number: 95% of coaches are probably weekend-only coaches, and you know, I think that's one of the big problems. As like in, I think it was Robin who mentioned about taxes having fixed rates. There is fixed amounts for courses, and so the result is that it's hard to offer more money and offer progression. I mean, there's a lot of people that are on exactly the same money that they were, you know, 10 years ago, and that's part of the problem. But I think it's more about the perks of the job that you can get along, as I say, tax deductions on your bike gear or whatever. They're the things that kind of keep people in it, and the ones that stay in it are passionate because they love imparting knowledge about riding. I mean, that's what why they stick at it. And I know that, you know, doesn't have a dollar value, but at the end of the day, I think it's why we're all in it.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in it for the money. I mean, I will make that joke to students. Like, look, I don't like any of you. I'm only in it for the millions that I'm making, clearly. You know, look at this t-shirt. This is a gold fleece t-shirt. I remember what I was laughing at was that it was when I was an early rider. I wasn't a coach yet. We were in Wisconsin, and we got lunch during a rally at Grumpy Troll that's let's see, Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, at Grumpy Troll. Great food. We parked our bikes. They had just done the pavement on the street, went in, ate lunch, came back out, and it was so hot that day. I know it doesn't get that, you know, too hot in Wisconsin, but it was peak heat. Whatever material they used on the street, the bikes didn't touch ground, but they had tipped in my hand, like they were just they were just like that and not touching yet. But all of our bikes in domino effect were just sunk. The side stands had punctured the pavement and just slowly, So we
happens regularly
whistled
in
and
summer.
run away.
Yeah, it happens
Absolutely.
regularly in summer down here.
That's something that happens in the St. Louis area with the pavement being so hot and the humidity being that way. You got to be careful there.
You guys have to hope that you get back out to straighten it up before it cools down and solidifies around your side stand.
I was at we ran for ice cream a while ago, and we came out and the bike had sunk into the side stand had sunk in, and I tore a big chunk out of their parking lot when I lifted my bike back up. It pulled out like a 3-inch circle of their blacktop parking lot with the side stand. I felt bad about it, but nothing I can do.
I'm guessing.
Is it still on the bike?
I'm guessing you probably didn't have a bike that had a center stand and didn't put it on the center stand like I could have done with a Goldwing.
Doesn't matter. I've seen center stands again.
Center stand thing too. Yep. And you know, if you come back later, as you say, I used to work with a coach. He'd tell the students, you know, you come back later and your bike sunk into the asphalt, you've got a motorcycle statue, you're stuck. So.
And I'm not hefting a ZG 1000 Concours up onto its center stand with any regularity.
No, you need a winch for that, don't you?
Just about.
Or is that
a winch,
optional?
a winch, a jack, and 3 small children to help.
I keep on messing up. See, I see Dennis's Goldwing in the background. I keep on sending the meme to my buddy.
Try doing that with a Goldwing when the asphalt is hotter and all get out, and then it sinks in there. I've had that happen a few times. Thankfully, I was able to get it back up center. Took up a little bit of asphalt, but it was able to do it.
I want to follow up on Duncan's point of what drives us and all, and probably a little more recognition would go quite a long way, and it could come at quite different levels. Usually, students, I'm sorry to say, you do your wrap up and the phone is out just as quick as it can be reached for. So the students, sometimes you'll get a very appreciative class, many times not, but it could come from your direct employer, it could come from the state level, it could come from dealers. It would carry a little bit of weight, and just a little pat on the back, a little attaboy would probably go quite a ways.
You know, when I get students that reach out to me after a class to say, boy, I had a great time in my class and I thought, so-and-so was an awesome coach, and, really, I share that email with the coach, but I also share it to the other coaches, to kind of, give props amongst the circle that, this coach did an awesome job and the students appreciated it. And of course, now that we've got Facebook and stuff, when a student comes to me with something like that, I said, oh, that, I really appreciate you coming back to me. Would you mind posting something on our page and, getting it out there? And they've all been pretty receptive to that. But I agree. I try to give props to the coaches, whenever I can. And, it's not always a thing, but if I can throw them a shirt or, and sometimes I'll, I haven't actually made corporate shirts in a long time because of budget stuff. We've also had a restricted price cap on our program, but I'll go get my coaches a good sun shirt, that's SPF, whatever, and they appreciate that.
I think also doing some professional development and other activities. For example, if you get everyone round for a pizza afterwards on one night and get a guest speaker that might be from, say a bike manufacturer or a university as an expert in teaching, or someone that can actually get them thinking outside the box. I think it's always nice to actually have those social activities as coaches, whether it be having a breakfast ride or a bit of a barbecue after work on a Friday or Sunday night or whatever, something that's just them. And in those moments is when you can actually all get together and say, okay, what was the highlight of your week, John, and what was the highlight of your week, Mary? And I'd like to just have a shout out to Arthur, who's just run his 100th course or whatever. I think those moments are things that you can, if you can foster that sense of community, because I've seen small rider training companies that are family-run businesses do really well because they've run it as a family, and they've had those connections with their staff where they actually recognise and You know, they build this loyalty that money can't buy. And I think those little times where, you know, you grab a cup of coffee with your staff, or you have them all around for a dinner or whatever, I think they're really valuable from a whole bunch of perspectives.
Duncan, we met up kind of through the
Yeah, that goes into something that
IFC motorcycle conference. What sessions have you found to be interesting to you with your expertise?
This might be an odd answer, but one of the things I find about motorcycling and motorcyclists, and particular coaches, is there is a pushback around technologies, particularly anti-lock braking, and there's a lot of myths around that. I found the papers that were presented at the International Motorcycle Conference that were talking about the trial and the user acceptance of autonomous emergency braking very interesting, because if you talk to most motorcyclists, they do not want their bike to brake for them. They don't want some intervention where suddenly the thing's applying brakes. And what was interesting, and one of the papers, I think it was on the third day, actually got participants' feedback on that, and there was quite a high level of support from the riders to say, hey, you know what, it wasn't scary. You know, it's been, I've seen motorcycle ABS evolve, and I know the early systems that I first experienced on the BMWs in the early 80s were quite horrible. They took forever to stop, and they shook you around like you're in a tin of nails, and the evolution in that technology has been enormous. And you know, I've done a lot of work with coaches to actually try and break some myths, because there's a lot of coaches out there that believe they can actually outbrake an ABS motorcycle, and that's never going to happen in a public street situation. In fact, I ran a training course for coaches when I was rolling out the new licensing scheme for Victoria 2 years ago. We had a lunchtime competition where I asked everybody to come down, and it was a block of chocolate for the motorcyclist who could do the stop in the shortest distance. And we had a little radar there, so we're measuring the speed, and they're all coming down at exactly 35 miles an hour, 60 kilometres in Australia. And each person had a go, and we'd put a little marker out, and that'd be the point to brake. And then, so for about a good 40 minutes, everybody kept having a go at this, trying to get this stop better and better and better. And they're all on identical motorcycles, all motorcycles from the training centre. And once we'd agreed on the best stop, and we said, okay, it looks like Alex has done the best stop, I said, okay, well, let's just grab that Ford over there. It's a hire car. I don't care who jumps in it, just come down, be a little bit over 35 mile an hour, and just try and put the pedal through the firewall, and just, stand on it. And it literally halved the best stop of the best motorcycle. And so, motorcyclists who still believed up to that point that they could outbrake a car. And so I think we need to actually educate motorcyclists and the rider training community around some of these technologies. And certainly those research papers from the international conference made me think about how much further along autonomous braking is for motorcycling than I thought it was. Certainly things like corner ABS and the like. To me, some of those safety benefits will certainly help motorcycling. That was my take on the international conference. How about you, Don?
Well, yeah, I find it all just fascinating. I think we do go a little bit too far in trusting technology, and that's not to degrade what technology can do with us, but for every form of technology, there's always the human element. The human factor that must either program, manufacture, or operate the technology that we're using. And I think the focus upon the technology without questioning the interaction between the human element and the technology is kind of like a compounding variable that you're just throwing out and deciding not to look at so much. And certainly because I believe so much in the rider education portion of motorcycle safety, I think we don't spend enough time getting to know what humans are capable of, what education can do in integrating all those technologies and having a better wherewithal and realizing that it's the motorcyclist that decides whether or not they have a crash, not necessarily everybody the motorcyclist is riding with on the street. So jaded slightly, all the information is awesome and expands my knowledge of what's going on, but I have a tendency to lean towards the human element. I really dug the people from India with the solar panel two-wheeler that as you park it, it charges on its own. I think that's something there.
Yep. I very much agree with you around we tend to trust in technology too much. And I think that trust, to me, that really demonstrates a lack of understanding of what the limitations are. I think one of the things that we're failing to do, certainly in Australia, around rider training and rider education, and this is true to driver education as well, is we fail to explain what these technologies can and can't do. And I was some of you may recall when the Honda S2000 came out, and I was at a training day, a launch of them down at called the Raceway, and I was with a very experienced driver who went into a corner at extreme speed, and we spun off the track. And he said to me, I thought the ESC would stop me doing that. I don't know why it happened. And I said, mate, it's all to do with traction and tires, and you just exceeded the limit. And that's the thing, there's always the physical limits of the road and the good slide of the road and the vehicle.
Who's doing this to us?
I think that'd be Rita.
Yeah,
that's Rita.
Yeah, I've been the last couple days I've been participating in a virtual conference on rural road safety, and this was a slide from one of the presenters talking about the human element of vehicle crashes, and the 57% driver factors is that in 50% of crashes, a driver factor was the sole reason for the crash, and in 93% of the crashes, driver factors were a contributing factor to the crash. Yeah, huge.
That's my Rita.
And when you look at vehicle factors, that's a very small portion of things contributing to crashes. So if we're trying to improve vehicles, it's, theoretically, if we fix the vehicles completely, we could only eliminate 3% of the crashes.
And in this instance of autonomous braking, I mean, I could imagine if a rider were completely clueless going down the road and all of a sudden his brakes went into, full stop, that could cause a crash in and of itself on two wheels, So there's two sides.
It seems that I remember when ABS was first coming out that it was recommended people purposely make it kick in so that you'd know what it felt like when the ABS kicks in, so it didn't freak you out when it kicked in an emergency.
I still tell students
But, sorry, say that again, L. Holland.
I still make that point to students that it's good to know what's going to happen when the ABS does kick in so that it doesn't surprise you.
Nice. So would you agree then, like, but when you engage ABS, you've actually gone beyond the shelf of the braking capability and then eliminated some of its braking power once it clicks on? I mean, braking, if you know where your ABS engages, that's your key to threshold braking on a bike that has it. Once it activates, you're kind of removing some power from that, in a manner of speaking. Anybody want to say?
On the older systems, that's true. On the modern systems, you see, the early systems were talking about 100 pulses per second, and now you've got systems that are 2,000 pulses per second. So in the early systems, what it was doing was going, okay, you've reached 100%. Now you're locking, let's back you off. The new systems are so smart. They're going, okay, we're now decelerating at this rate. You are at 99.9%. And that's when you're feeling the movement. So they've evolved. The new Bosch 4th generation stuff has evolved to the point where it's not actually having the wheel locked like historically, like an older system would have. The older systems were locking and releasing. These are at the verge of locking. So there's a bit of a difference. Having said that, I think as trainers, we still need to be teaching the same technique of essentially two-stage braking where you're gentle then firm, and having that one methodology regardless. So I remember a trainer who used to be a submariner, and he said to me, when we actually teach going from the surface to submerging, it's always a crash dive. There's no ever, you know, let's just gradually just go underwater. It's always, you've got to do it against the clock as fast as you possibly can, because you only want one system, and that's true to emergency braking. So every time you touch those brakes, it should be gentle and firm. And whether you're using ABS or you're slowing down for a traffic light or you're slowing down because a car's pulled in front of you, it should always be the same process. And that's my take on it.
You know, and I actually tell that to my BRC students. I said, you want to make your braking be very consistent. And after we finish our quick stop exercise, I tell them, you know, well, we're going to practice quick stops later, but between now and later, every exercise has stops in it. So you can work on the things that are the same for all your stops. Head and eyes up, both brakes. We're going to squeeze progressively once. And you know, we're going to get our clutch and downshift in. And so when we revisit quick stops, the only thing that changes is the intensity of the squeeze. And I find in my own bikes, my previous bike had a Nighthawk S, didn't have ABS, and I could kind of predictably bring that to threshold braking. I knew where.
Hold on. A Nighthawk S. Tell me, wait, I gotta look this up now.
It's a fabulous bike. Great motorcycle. You know, well, I actually still have it. It's in the garage, but I haven't ridden it in many years. It's an awesome bike. Now I have an FJR, and the FJR has ABS, and I find that the ABS kicks in on me sooner than I think I would have reached threshold braking on the Nighthawk. And maybe it's just I don't have as much of a feel for the threshold with the ABS system, or maybe it's just up to engage a little sooner, you know? So in some respects, I like the non-ABS better, and yet I like the insurance of the ABS in case I F up, you know, that it's going to bail me out.
I was gonna say, I'll bet you money that that ABS is tuned to that chassis. It's, you know, that's no Nighthawk S, which I'm gonna, oh, look at this. Yeah, that is a KZ. That's a KZ fairing on that. That's what that is. I can see it from here. I'm gonna be looking at my Google window here in a second.
Yeah, but
No,
was the
that is a
KZ
Nighthawk
shaft
S
drive?
fairing.
No.
The Nighthawk S's shaft drive, that's one of its defining characteristics.
Yep.
That is freaking crazy. That's awesome.
700 shaft drive.
Great bike.
Laura and Lynn just hooked up the knowledge on me. Oh, and also Duncan, what was it? Submarine. Yeah.
Submariner.
I'm not gonna lie. It took me Submariner. It took me about 30 seconds to catch up. The conversation was like, Submariner. What is a Submariner? Do I need one for my kitchen sink? I don't have a Submariner in my bathroom.
Well, what do you call a guy that lives in a submarine?
Submariner.
Only
Clearly,
Robin.
you're not a Rolex guy then either, Robin.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, this calculator watch has been doing fine since 1983.
So along this vein, and getting back to the human element, I have a Volvo S60, which is
We're
I'm
sorry
so
about that.
sorry.
yeah, it's a great car,
Congratulations.
but it has active cruise control. So as I tool down the highway and get lazier and lazier, the cruise control controls the distance between me and another vehicle, which is really great. And if I'm coming up on a vehicle too quick, of course, the active cruise will emergency stop me from doing the wrong things. And sometimes even when I'm not doing cruise control, it sends me that warning that, hey, maybe I should give myself some more space and time, a better safety margin. The problem with that is if you drive it too much, then when I jump into the Volkswagen Cabriolet, and that has none of the newfangled stuff, and I get too close, sometimes I forget that I can't get that close, and I have to do the work. Very similar to, jumping on my Bridgestone TMX 100 and tootling down the road and have to do all the thinking, all the manipulation, or jumping on the Ducati Multistrada that kind of like takes some of the hard thinking out. So it always goes back to the human element. If we get too used to some of these newfangled technological, make your life easier gadgets, we always run the risk of putting ourselves in a position where it's not there when we need it, and thus put ourselves in more danger. So training without them, just like when I'm flying a helicopter, turning off my automated flight control system to manipulate the controls without assistance, that becomes very important. And I think we lose sight of the fact that as humans, we still have the obligation that if we're going to ride that vehicle, we need to be able to handle anything that could happen on the vehicle. And, so then I go back to the human factor. We seem to forget it way too much.
When I got GPS first, my own experience with GPS, when I got a GPS for my niece when she went to college so that she wouldn't find herself stranded in the middle of nowhere and not know how to get back to school. And I said to her, listen, just because it says turn right, you still have to check for traffic. You kind of get into a mode where it tells you to do stuff and you just want to do it. You still have to be driving the car. And I found that there was a little mental shift I had to make for myself, as I made that transition.
I have that problem with the backup camera in my truck.
I think time overtakes technology. I think, when was the last time you taught someone how to advance or retard their ignition, or start a car by pulling out the choke?
Oh, I got a story for you. Let me know when I got on mic.
So I think sometimes things progress so far that, my other passion is I actually teach canyoneering. And I find that there's things that we taught 30 years ago to rappel down a cliff that you wouldn't even dream of mentioning now. And people say, oh, we used to teach using no carabiners and just rope wrapped around you, and people laugh at you and go, yeah, how stupid were you just doing that? And I think, as time evolves and we get better at things, there are some things that we can let go of. And certainly, I don't think everything that we had, we need to keep teaching if the technology's really removed the need, and things like fuel ignition, electronic fuel ignition, and those sort of things are examples, I suppose.
Well, in the old days on your car road test, you used to have to do hand signals because not all the cars had electric turn signals. And now those electric turn signals have become the standard, and you really don't have cars on the road except for antiques that don't have them. Now you no longer need to do hand signals on your road test.
And most people don't use the signals in the car anyway, so who cares?
They all use some signals.
Yeah.
That's what they give to a lot of
That's pretty
motorcyclists.
Yeah, I have not at all.
Is use hand signals to make the turns, because that's what I do a lot of times on the bike. I'll use a hand signal as well as my turn signal, so I make sure they see me.
Yeah, it's actually good
what
for
is he
Riley
doing?
world. All right, well, I'm gonna have to bail after this. I've got 10% battery left, and my connection is made up of. I'm not at my destination yet. But okay, so quick story was a friend of mine, Mike Dunn. He was coaching at a military base, and he had new students. They were required to learn to ride. It was mandatory if they wanted to own a bike, because they were getting too many people were coming back and getting hurt because they were, soldiers going out there and drinking and whatever. So they had to take the class. My buddy Mike Dunn is coaching this class, and he had one particular student. He said, "All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to find the friction zone, apply some throttle. You're going to ride from point A to point Z, whatever it was. It was previous curriculum, and you'll stop there, or it might have been sport bike curriculum, and you'll stop there. Rider rides from point A to point bajillion, wherever, and when they get there, they come to what looked like a pause and go, and then they fell over on their side. And instructor friend rolled up and he said, "Why didn't you put your feet down?" Immediate response: "Because you did not tell me to, sir." So with that, I'm gonna run out of battery, and my wife's mad at me. We're gonna go walk the dog here in north of Dallas, and then I'll see you guys next week in Kerrville, Texas. I will have a full connection, and I look forward to it.
Have a good night. Thank you. So I never did quite explain all this stuff to you, Duncan. We call this happy hour. It's just whatever comes up, we talk about. And every Wednesday night we get together, and, sometimes it's kids and dogs and cats, and other times serious conversations like we've had tonight. But typically we've been doing one night a month that's called Tribe Talk, just a group of people with similar ideas and thoughts, and all within the rider coaching or instructor community. And we actually do presentations. So I invite you. I'll send you the email with the information, and if you can make it, you can make it, and if you don't. But I've certainly enjoyed your company tonight. You've added a lot to the conversation. Would everybody agree? See, look at all those thumbs up. That's awesome.
Your timing was excellent, because it's actually 10 o'clock on Thursday morning here. So we are at the moment 14 hours ahead, and about to hit summertime this weekend, actually. So it'll.
That means I have to come there and start coaching instead of here. That's here. We're turning into winter.
Yeah. So
Let me know when you go. I'll join. Go with you.
It's just fortunate that this particular Thursday morning I've got off, so I'm able to join you. So it was good timing, because I'd normally be working. I've got another video conference in about half an hour, so kind of slotted in nicely. But it certainly is. It's refreshing to talk to coaches from certainly another planet, another place to Australia, in that it's nice to know that we're all having the same issues and problems and concerns. It's not, none of us are Robinson Crusoe here, in that, we all see the same passion. We want to see motorcycling get safer, and we want to see the best quality education. It's just how we actually get it there. And that's something I've been struggling with for over 20 years, is trying how to lift the industry. And it's a difficult task, because you only just get one group of instructors doing a really good job, and then they move on and you're back to scratch. It's just a constant, never-ending project, and developing curriculum. I mean, we've had a lot of major changes in curriculum across the east coast of Australia in the last 2-3 years, and I think we can always make our coaching and instruction better. It's just that we need to bring the industry along on the journey, and that's the hard part. Because as I was saying to Don in our correspondence, you know, we made some major changes to the training program down here in one of the southern states in the end of 2016, 2017, and I trained about 100 instructors in the new program, and 12 months later, I went out and did some audits to see how it was being delivered, and about 30% were doing it absolutely beautifully. About 30% were close but needed some support, and another 30% had just started doing their own thing again and delivering stuff that was just not very good. And so, you know, it's not just a question about professional development, it's about monitoring, quality assurance, auditing, and whatever words you like to use. But it's, I think, because money is so tight in rider training and it's so difficult to make ends meet, it's very, very hard as an organisation to dedicate a staff member to go and supervise and check and watch other people. And that's, you know, that's where we need to get creative with how we actually do that financially, whether we say, okay, we're going to employ a staff member, a senior coach that goes out and watches that person for 2 hours each, you know, 2 hours there, and then another person for 2 hours. And you've just got to have a look at ways that can be done within your budget, because I think that's the only way we're going to evolve if we're doing quality assurance and professional development.
Well, that's a great topic. I was just QA'd this past Saturday. Here in the Wisconsin Motorcycle Safety Program, we have the QA team. There's how many coaches on that, Rita?
On the QA team, there's probably 10 active and 15, an additional 5 to that 10 that are occasional.
So they go, correct me if I'm wrong, but they go out to sites with some semblance of organization or randomly and see how we're doing. Rita is the one who QA'd me on Saturday and had some suggestions for improvement and some attaboys for stuff I did do right. There's like one of those and a lot of suggestions for improvement.
She's a hard lady. She's hard.
Yeah, that's what I heard about Rita.
Well, you know, if she, from my perspective as the rider coach being QA'd, having a quality assurance visit from Rita, who's an RCT, is if she doesn't have a handful of suggestions, at least for me to improve on, then she's not doing her job. She's there to help me improve and facilitate the curriculum as best we can. So that's what she's there to do.
One of the things we teach on our instructor course is the concept of knowledge being like an iceberg, where the stuff you deliver to the students is the piece above the water, and the stuff under the water is the content and knowledge you need in your back pocket to handle tricky students or difficult questions or problems that you've never encountered with. And I think, you know, the students get to see that bit above the water, and it should remain constant, but we can always continue to build that bit under the water. We can always look at other areas of education and try and see how they apply to what we're doing in rider training. And I think there's a lot of other industries that have evolved. If you look at the work health and safety or the occupational health safety area, they've got some great teaching methodologies and ideas that really can come across into rider training. You know, you look at marketing, you know, some of the behavioural change models. So I think one of the things about professional development is to look outside your own little paradigm and the own little area that you work in, and look at stuff that you can draw from other industries. As I said, I like adventure activities, canyoneering and the like, and there's a lot of things that I ran a rescue weekend last Sunday and looked at different rescue techniques, and some of those those ideas that we trialled in delivering that course, I'll be putting into future motorcycle instructor training. So cross-pollination, I think, is a really important thing.
I think the cross-pollination is what improves us, is bringing different ideas, good different ideas in from different sectors, because when it comes down to it, it's all safety, risk management, or looking at risk. Certainly motor skill development fits in all kinds of adventure sports and activities, or even everyday life. So any resource that we can bring into rider education that works in something similar on the outside certainly benefits us all. I think we all get, we call it siloed here, where our information comes from one source, and that's all good and well, but it doesn't help us expand our horizons or expand our mindset in what can be accomplished. And so your point is well taken. I appreciate it.
Have you guys, do you use in the work health and safety space in America the hierarchy of controls for managing risk?
In one way or another, yes.
Yeah, it's a work occupational health and safety model where step one is if you've identified a risk, you can step one's to eliminate it, and then you can look at if you can't eliminate, then you can look at substitution or an engineering control, and then you go down the hierarchy and what they call below the line interventions of things like protective equipment and policies. And what I find interesting is that although it's well used throughout the world in workplace safety, it's very rarely applied to rider training and education. Because when you think about it, how often do we suggest as a strategy to reduce risk, say to a motorcyclist, well, you know, why don't you go another route? Or why don't you, one of the activities that we put in the curriculum for the Victorian licensing scheme was looking at the difference between tactics and strategies. Now, for a lot of people, that might sound like semantics, but if you think about a tactic as something that is here and now, so you see a car waiting to come out of a side street, your tactic might be to slow down and create a buffer away from it. Whereas a strategy might be something you do beforehand where you say, okay, well, why was I even going down that street? I know that street's got a lot of blind cross streets, so why don't I go down the highway? It's going to take me a little bit longer, but it's actually safer. And it's one of those things that I think, where there's lots of different work in different areas, and if you start thinking about how we can apply it to rider education, there's some really good things we could do. I don't know if you're familiar with the Finnish GDE matrix, which is the goals for driver education. The GDE matrix actually puts it as a hierarchy and looks at how you can build these strategies to look at how to prevent crashes, not just in 5 minutes, but assessing a crash situation and saying, okay, what could the rider have done 5 seconds earlier, or 5 minutes earlier, or 5 hours earlier, or even 5 days before, and actually evaluating those things differently and say, okay, well, what if they'd simply chosen another route, or 5 days before had put new tyres on because they'd seen that the bike was getting low on tread. So it's about looking at a bigger picture, and some of those things, as I say, other industries have got great models for safety that we should steal from.
I think there's lots of places in our level 2 curriculum to pull in content like that, because lots of the activities have to do with the rider assessing the choices that they make. And I tell them, everything you do on your bike is a choice. Am I going to ride today? Where am I going to ride? What am I going to wear? How fast am I going to go? Am I going to pass this guy? Am I going to wait out this rainstorm? And there's so many decisions, and that the choices you make have consequences. and you need to be thinking about what the consequences could be, which in your car, you maybe don't have to think about as much. So it's a shift in your thought process from 4 wheels to 2 wheels, and what matters on 2 wheels doesn't always matter in 4 wheels.
We give an example in one of the training courses where we say, okay, you've just started a new job and the job's in the city and you've never been there before, and you know you start next Monday and you're going to have to ride to work every day. What strategies could you do to make that first ride on the bike safer? And it's a really good discussion because they come up with things like, oh, well, drive there in the car on the weekend first and check out the route, or do the drive virtually by using Google Maps, or they actually have a lot of really good ways to reduce the risk. But what's interesting is humans, when it comes to the day, we're actually quite lazy and we don't bother with some of that stuff when we know it's actually a lot smarter. I've done a lot of work with older drivers and looking at the risk of older riders and motorcyclists, and what's really interesting is that they're very, very good at reducing risk by looking at strategies such as, I'm not going to turn at this intersection, I'm going to go down 3 blocks and turn at the traffic lights because I don't like turning across traffic because I don't feel safe.
You know,
And
it's so funny that you say that, because years ago I had a car student who was a woman who had become widowed, and she had her license, but while she was married, they only had 1 car in the household. Her husband did all the driving. And then her husband died, and now she's on her own. And because her husband died, she had to go back to work. And so she was taking on a new job and kind of getting reintroduced to car driving after years of being a passenger. And so she came for some lessons, and she says, well, you know what I'd really like to do is drive to where I'm going to work, because I'm scared to death of driving there. And so we had a couple of practice runs driving to work and identified the tricky intersections and things to watch out for when you get to this point. And she felt much more confident, afterwards, that she'd be able to kind of progress with her life. She was having this big life change, and she just needed a little bit of a boost, in her knowledge and comfort level to make the commute.
It was excellent of her to identify the issues and find the solution, wasn't it?
The beauty of our current basic rider course that we updated between 2013 and 2014 is that it really gets the rider into the mindset of looking at those types of things, Duncan. Unfortunately, it's taken until now to where we are just at the last 1 or 2 states that maybe adopt that curriculum. So it's a long road, like you're going through now, to get these positive changes where we look at risk offset and how things like risk homeostasis puts us into bad situations. And like Lynn says, making the appropriate behavioral choices to survive the ride, so to speak. It's been a long time coming.
And it's still going, I suspect. It's a never-ending journey. One of the things that we've been working a lot recently in Australia is changing the delivery methodology from a very traditional instructor-trainer type mode to more a coach mode. And that's born out of a lot of European research around the fact that you don't achieve behavioural training through instruction, you achieve it through coaching. And understanding the difference between those methodologies is very hard for a lot of people to get across the different nuances of the 2 styles. And I still see instructors instructing rather than coaching. And I like the fact that you guys use the word coach, because you should be a motorcycle coach, because it's very easy to just tell someone and say, okay, you came down and did that stop, your head was you dropped your head, you didn't look up enough, or, you need to grip your knees in tight, rather than saying, okay, where were you looking that time? Or what could you have done to get more stability, with the lower body and asking questions rather than telling. And it's funny, particularly when we're pushed for time or we perceive a high safety risk, we tend to fall back to that tell mode rather than the ask and coach mode. And it's really hard to change behaviours in coaches that have been there for 20 years. So it's as I say, Don, it's never ending piece of work, whether it be the curriculum or the development of the trainers.
And the reason why people go back to that is that's how they learn, that's what they know. And changing over to the coaching or facilitation of learning versus the dictator or didactic learning, as we all suffered through when we were a child, is difficult. And even with this change of curriculum forcing us to be more of a facilitator or a coach, we still have struggles with it. I think it's just, part of the growth of being an educator and moving on to something we know since the 60s and 70s or even before that it works better, but changing the mindset is quite difficult.
I think there's times to ask and there's times to tell, but the value of the asking is it lets you figure out if they understand what or how come. It gives you an insight into what's going on in their heads. Whereas if you just tell them, you really don't know if they know it or not.
I think it also brings ownership, because if you work out a problem together, then they own part of the solution and they feel that it belongs to them. I mean, it's to me, from a perspective of an adult educator, the first thing that any adult student needs is to know the why. Why am I doing this? And secondly, they need to own it. And I think those are things that we forget. One of the things that's in our driving test in Australia is a look right and left for red light runners. And I watch examiners say to people, now, when you do your driving test, make sure you look left and right when you move off from traffic lights. And that's like saying to a 17-year-old, as soon as you've got your license, don't ever bother doing it again, because they don't actually understand the why. They're just told, when it's a test, do this. Whereas if you actually say to them, what are the risks when we proceed from a light when it changes? And you have a conversation when they actually identify the risk of someone running the red. And you then have a conversation about, okay, well, how could you reduce that risk? Well, pretty simple. You just have a look right and left to make sure that there's no one running the red light. They have the ownership. They've done the problem solution, but they understand the why, and they're going to continue the behaviour long after they've passed their driving test. And I think we tend to, it's very easy to just tell them, look right and left when you move off from lights. It takes a lot more conversation and time to actually talk about what are the risks, what are our mitigation, what are we going to do about it. And that's where I think we get lazy, or we're time pressured.
Yeah, but the time pressure, I mean, it's a short-term save in time, but it's a long-term cost in time. If we did it right the first time and explained why, the lesson sticks longer, and we save rescuing them later, or the long-term significant consequences in all the costs.
Yes, well, one of my other, as I've mentioned, I'm into the outdoors, and I've spent 30 years with the Boy Scouts, but although they're not Boy Scouts in Australia, they're Scouts because we've got girls. I was actually at the World Scout Jamboree last year in America, so that's my visit over to you guys. But one of the interesting things is exactly that, Rita, where you give a bunch of scouts a tent and say, put it up. And if you actually do it for them and help them, they never actually learn. Whereas if they actually have the learning experience themselves, and it might take 10 times longer to explain it and actually get them to do it. But at the end of the day, when it's, pouring rain and it's nighttime, they know how to do it themselves rather than you being around trying to hold their hand. And one of the things I think we, one of the lines I teach when I'm training driving instructors and driving coaches is that, as a parent, what are our duties? And our duties is to prepare our kids for the day when we're not around. And I think that's very true to being a trainer in motorcycling, is we've got to prepare our students for the day we're not around. And it's no good if we're constantly holding their hand and telling them everything.
Same back to the children. If you're telling your scouts or your children, don't do that, and you don't tell them why, you're going to be saying don't do that an awful lot more than if you would have just explained the rationale behind it in the first place. And that might stick a lot more than, oh, let's see if we can get away with this again, until we get told don't do that again.
What's actually interesting is that as humans, we much prefer strength language where we're actually told this is what you should be doing. And it's interesting, as trainers, we often fall into the don'ts. And a classic example, you see a bunch of kids running and you hear teachers say, don't run. And you'll hear one teacher say, everybody please walk. And so it's much clearer because you state your expectation. And I think, again, it's one of those things, how we use language and how we phrase things and how we present it to people makes a big difference to how we learn.
Duncan, what you don't know is that for years, Rita has given a great presentation at our International Rider Education Training Systems Conference that say words matter.
That's why I'm enjoying the conversation. I think found a bit of a partner in crime here.
She's got
I
a
love
lot
that
of us
point.
in trouble.
I love that point in the class where your students, though, they start telling you what they did wrong. And you know, that you can see the light bulbs are going on and you can kind of step back almost a little bit because they've started to figure stuff out for themselves. And that's really the goal, really, is that they have enough information to go out and fix their own mistakes. And even if they're not perfect at it right in that moment, they know what they're doing wrong and they know what they have to do. They just have to fiddle with it a little bit more to
And that's exactly right. That is the goalpost, because as riders, we have to be able to analyse our own errors and evolve and look at what we did and say, okay, well, that was pretty rough. How could I make it smoother? And how could I do that better? And what am I going to do next time so I don't get that fright when the car, suddenly turns? What did I miss? So it's asking those questions that I think helps us develop our riding.
We're much further ahead if we can graduate students who don't have the greatest skills, physical skills, but have really great self-assessment skills, as opposed to a student who has really good physical skills but has no clue why.
So true.
So we've kept you. You said you had another meeting. I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, no, that's at 11. So that's
okay. Good.
Totally fine.
All right. Just wanted to be sure. Didn't want to over abuse you tonight.
This morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. This morning.
I do need another cup of coffee, I've got to admit.
Well, it takes all kinds of stuff, isn't it?
As you can see, Duncan, these conversations are addicting. We originally had these scheduled for 1 hour, and it didn't take long for them to morph into 2-hour sessions. And it's gotten so we have to cut everybody off after 2 hours and say, okay, somebody's got to say it's time to go to bed.
And usually it's me, and I apologize for that because I dig it so much, but at a certain point I get in trouble.
So is it my assumption correct that it's a pretty good cross-section from across the states? Are you mostly, are you well dispersed as a group?
Well, this is my opinion and my opinion only. Having been in all but a couple of these, yes, we get a pretty good cross-section from all of the United States. What I will tell you is the people that generally show up here are the people who have the most passion, who have a great desire to learn, to take it to the next level. and be vulnerable when they throw stuff out that maybe not everybody agrees with. And that's what makes it such a great conversation, is we can bounce ideas off of each other, and from there, as a group, and that's why we call it Tribe Talk, as a group, we kind of find our way with other members of the tribe to make improvements. And so, yes, a pretty decent cross section. Sometimes we're heavy in the Midwest, sometimes on the East Coast, but on occasion we get some pretty good representation from the left coast or the West Coast of the United States, and it always makes it more interesting.
Did Duncan say well dispersed or well disturbed?
Dispersed.
Thank you.
Actually both, but you know, who cares?
But as motorcycle coaches, I would take the latter as well.
I think overall not that I'm coming to realize it now, but the reflective part of our exercises can be even more powerful than just those two questions that are suggested. That's a great time to do some of those behavioral changes or self-assessment. You know, it's not all self-assessed in the classroom. That range time when they have finished and can have a discussion without us around, we may start it and then throw some cones, but at least it's a time when they can talk among themselves and change some of their behaviors or strategies towards the learning they just accomplished. Just wanted to throw that out there. Another thing I throw out there is when I teach, I actively try not to use the word don't. I try to insert avoid, maybe next time try XYZ, but I purposely avoid the word don't.
From a language and literacy perspective, that's a really good practice, Rick, because the interesting thing is that English is one of those few languages that actually uses prefixes and suffixes, and from people who come from English as a second language, it's amazing how many people just don't hit a knot in that. You know, they miss it. And it's like, I did some work where we were talking about broken and unbroken lines up the center of a road, and it was interesting how many people perceived the word unbroken to mean a dotted line. And of course, unbroken is a solid line. And so it's an interesting piece of language that things like, as I say, unbroken. In fact, I was just looking at a piece of research of Japanese students in university trying to learn English at university level. So these guys are educated people, and about 80% of them struggled to comprehend words with prefixes in them. So it was a really interesting piece of literature about how people learning English really, depending on the cultural background, can really struggle with that.
That is an interesting point. And of course, here in the States, we have such cultural diversity, and we have people coming, you know, obviously from all countries, from all over, and their interpretation of our words, that could be powerful. That could be a changer, you know, a changer in instruction.
And our demonstrations too. When I started in rider education, we used to demonstrate what we called wrong rides. We'd say, okay, don't ride like this, you know, don't ride with your arms stiff. And people would look at those demonstrations, and if they actually didn't understand that we were deliberately showing the wrong way, they would then mimic that behavior. And it's a pretty dumb way to teach. You know, and thankfully we've evolved from that, but I still see people say, I don't, you know, I don't want you to have your hand wrist like that when you hold the throttle. Whereas we should be always demonstrating absolute as perfection as we can get it, as to the best that we can, within our abilities, and show, okay, this is exactly how I want your wrist position. This is exactly how I want your posture. And so, yeah, because we also forget about other disabilities, people who are deaf and not just language ones. I mean, I've taught groups of riders with, course where every student was absolutely, totally legally deaf, and you rely 100% on your ability to demonstrate and have them copy your actions and watch you. So I think what we do and what we say, we underestimate the strength of it.
Applying that directly to the curriculum that we use in exercise 1 on the range, when we show students the static demo of what happens when you stop with your handlebars turned and what happens when you stop with the handlebars square, consider when you're teaching how many times and in what order you show the stop with the handlebars turned as opposed with a stop with a handlebars square, and they'll probably remember the last thing they see. So trying to have handlebars square be the last thing they see.
Yeah, the educational effect of primacy and recency is exactly that we always remember the first thing and the last thing and tend to forget the middle. So I tend to agree with you, Rita, in that we always want to leave an activity with a positive behaviour demonstrated, because that's the take home. And so whether we're packaging a session or a demonstration, it always should be finished with, this is exactly what we need to do.
As far as the language and saying don't do this, even with people who English is their primary language, I had heard something once that with children, they tend not to hear the very first piece. So if you say to your child, don't spill your milk, they hear spill your milk. They don't hear that first word. And so they think they should, even if it's subconsciously, they hear spill your milk, and there it goes.
Yeah, that's very true. That's also a result of a cognitive delay process that can occur, because it's like when you hear a gunshot. I always used to say you need 3 gunshots to work out where it's coming from, because the first time you hear a gunshot, you go, oh, was that a gunshot? And the second gunshot, you go, oh, yes, it was a gunshot. Where did it come from? And the third one, you go, oh, yes, it's a gunshot. That's where it came from. Our brain takes time to process things like that. And often there's that mental lag at the beginning where, as you say, we don't hear the don't.
Duncan, if I can jump in and kind of follow up on your talk about doing demonstrations. We all screw up, it's in, we're going to mess up a demo. What my practice has been is to come over to wherever the riders are watching, whether that's staging area or out in the range someplace, and I'll stop and I'll tell them, did you see what I did wrong? And then I'll go repeat the exercise, the demo, because I don't want them seeing me do it wrong and thinking that that's the way I want them to do it. So I try to make a practice of correcting myself, and also that lets them know that I'm not perfect either.
I think that's a really good practice. There's a word of caution there in that when I was a new instructor and I'd say, oh, oops, I made a mistake then. Did you see what I did wrong? And I'd have students rattle off 20 different things, and some of them are things that I actually had done right. So you need to sort of box that in and say, okay, I made an error there with my braking, or so you give them guidance as to where the error was, so as that you don't get this plethora of things. Oh, your head was down and your knees are out and your arms are too tight. And no, they were all right. You know, my problem was that I was, you know, so it's like one of my, if you like, pet hates is that when I see a new instructor, they tend to they tend to question students on knowledge that they've not yet delivered. So it's one of those things where they say, okay, can someone tell me, you know, what the clutch does? Now that's a reasonable question to ask because they probably have the experience from a car, but I would preface that with who drives a manual car, and then you might say, can somebody tell me what a clutch does? So, but if you ask a question where they've got absolutely no expectation, you can always end up with the wrong answer. So if you said to a question, okay, which is the strongest brake, and you haven't told them, and somebody says, oh, it's the back, then the rest of the group have heard that as the answer, and some of them are now thinking that's actually the answer, whereas you then have to correct and go, no, actually the front's the more powerful brake. So it's a really, it's, I suppose in simplifying what I'm saying is when we use questions, we do need to actually give guidance around where we want the answer to come from. We should also be questioning them on things that we can realistically expect them to know. And also, so question is confirmation of learning rather than, yeah. It's getting questions right is a very, very difficult thing to actually do properly. So I commend you for what you're doing, Steve. It's definitely the right way to do it. Be aware there's some traps.
Well, everybody, we are at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which would be 11 a.m. Australian time, if I'm
And
correct.
I do have to go.
We very much appreciate you showing up tonight, Duncan. Please feel free to stop by anytime. I'll certainly put you on the mailing list. We greatly appreciate your knowledge base and your input for Tribe Talks Happy Hour tonight. And I will be sharing this with a lot of people. I think your content really added to a normal, fun weekly get together and made it very informative as well.
Absolute pleasure, Don, and I will endeavour to, as best of my ability, drop in whenever I can. I thoroughly enjoyed talking shop with you guys and Guyettes.
And by all means, invite your friends. That's what this is about, is building the community and making the tribe.
You don't want to be overrun by Australians. I can give you the drum on that.
No, I tell you, I think we quite enjoy it, and we'd give back as good as we take.
Yeah, but I'll need subtitles.
Okay, well, we all have to learn sometime.
Thanks.
Thank you once again, sir. We'll talk to you later. Hey, Ron, you want to join us? I'm beginning to worry.
Don't wake him.
Well, I'm worried we may have a medical issue here. Steve, thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. We don't get unicorns like you in this forum too often.
Well, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
And by all means, invite your friends. We look for anybody who would enjoy the conversation.
I run a program here in Kansas, and I've got about 10 instructors. Some of them teach on the military base in addition to teaching for me, and actually 2 or 3 of them also teach for a Harley program here in Topeka. And so we get kind of a diverse bunch of folks, but I'll share this with them, and if they can jump on, I would encourage them to do so.
Absolutely. And, we accept all kinds here. Look at Ron. I mean, he's kind of enjoying himself in his own way. That's cruel, isn't it? No, but really, and you know what? I also post all the old videos from the past on the website. So if anybody wants to go back I know this one should be viewed by a lot of people. I think it was one of our best happy hours, where we actually got to some content that was awesome.
I'm looking forward to actually going back and seeing some of the things I've missed over the winter. You know, when we've got downtime, I'm thinking it's going to be a good thing.
I think so too. And, you know I said it, maybe not, I don't know if it was last week or the week before. There's some coaching tips that come out of here that I think I'm going to go back and look through it over the winter and maybe do tribe talk tidbits where, those small coaching tips may be beneficial for people, or maybe just small tidbits of information that I think we all think are helpful, and we'll take and we'll make. I like videos that are 3 minutes or less. There's a push in education right now for what they call the 3-minute thesis. So if you can get your point across in 3 minutes, typically people learn really quick, and that's a great way to provide the information to them. So I may be looking for tribe help and kind of scouring some of the old videos to bring that to fruition and make those cuts for people so that we can share good information and we don't have to have people, spend 2 hours looking for it.
Can you just say who that guy was?
Let me know what your search parameter is, and I might be able to isolate some clips.
All I'm looking for is information that would help a new coach.
Okay.
Or an old coach.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
Can you say who that guy was, please, for the benefit of those of us who don't know?
Okay, so Duncan McRae is one of the Dr. Rays of Australia, for lack of better terms. I think that puts it in a really good perspective. He did a lot of research in 2016, 2017 with a group of people who work on education and rider education in Australia, specifically in the Sydney area and around there. And there are tons, if you want to look, of research articles, manuscripts, data that him and that group worked on. So he's a very well-respected guy. And the reason why he was here tonight is he reached out to me and he said, hey, I liked what I read and I would like to, be in contact and let's have discussions. And this is what it blossomed into. You gotta love it. You just gotta love it. So good guy, good guy. And Ron's still.
Thanks for soliciting him to join, because I think that was just really, really super interesting and useful for all of us.
Well, thank him for doing it. I think that's pretty awesome. And it's got me thinking about who else that we can con into joining Tribe Talk. So if you know somebody, by all means, I think it adds another level of interest. And what amazed me is, having read just about everything from Australia that I could get my hands on in my research, don't they seem a lot like us? Their problems, their issues, even with probably a little bit more superior graduated and tiered licensing system, they still run the same challenges that we do here in America, which leads me to think that, what we're struggling with, what our challenges are the same all over the world. So if we can reach out to more of those people, if we can bring them into the tribe, if we can glean information off of them, maybe we will all benefit from it. And so here ends the sermon for tonight's Tribe Talk. Pretty awesome. That makes me feel good inside that he actually showed up. So it's all about connections, isn't it? All right, Any alibis before we send Ron off to bed tonight?
He's gonna wake up to an empty room.
I hope so.
I hope that you all get on the Facebook and give him a little razzin.
I sent him a wake up text, but I guess it wasn't a big enough ping. So
it was so exciting.
Just as an aside, I had a class this week on my compact range, and about half the class really had a hard time following directions, but in that way that it got to be kind of comical, because it was like, holy crap, how could all these people not be able to follow directions? And I found myself a lot, because if I didn't laugh, I'd be crying a little bit maybe. It was pretty good though.
I just wanted to make sure he was breathing. I think we're okay.
Okay, but you gotta screenshot that and post it somewhere.
And I'm assuming, is he breathing?
Yes, he is.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I was like, maybe we should call his wife. All right.
It happened to anyone.
It could.
It could.
There
It's
before the
unusual.
grace of God go I.
It's unusual for it to be Ron, though. He is usually so wound.
It's
Maybe we wore him out.
I think so. I was looking for a way to maybe like ping him, and it doesn't allow. Oh well.
Oh well.
Maybe if we play loud music. Run!
Yeah, I was just gonna say, put a screen share on that's like some obnoxious like TikTok video or something.
Oh my goodness.
Oh. All right, y'all.
Well, good night,
thanks for
all.
a wonderful evening. What a great night. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. And hopefully I'll get some videos out and we can go back and check this out. I think this is one of our better get-togethers. What a great guy.
Cool.
Have a good night.
I'm sure Ron would agree with you.
I think he is telepathically in his dreams.
I just hope he already dropped off my cards for tomorrow's class.
It's hard to say.
I'll let you know next week.
I hope.
I still got to find my lacrosse gloves. See if I can teach a class with lacrosse gloves in a bathrobe.
Yeah, you do have a due out on that, Mike. Get with it.
I've only got 2 more chances. This is our last weekend here.
Oh my. Maybe that's why he's so tired. It's been a long year.
Packed a lot into 3 months.
Yep. Steve, thanks for showing up. Nicole, as always. Chris.
Oh, he is alive. Look at that.
Oh.
Hi, Ron.
Yay!
How was your nap, Ron?
What, you think you lost me?
We were worried. We were a little bit worried.
We were all checking to see if we could see you breathing.
I just wanted to make sure I had my cards for today's or tomorrow's class.
Yeah, Mike didn't care if you were breathing. Mike didn't care if you were breathing. He just needed his cards.
Yeah.
Needs a roster first.
I can make that up. I can't make up the cards.
This is
All
true.
right. I feel good about this. I can go home and go to bed in peace now. Ron is alive. Life is good.
Aren't you already home?
Well, when I go out that door, I'm home. This is work.
Okay.
This is the office.
That's your commute. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it's longer than others. Depending on whether I have to go downstairs for a cup of coffee or, it's the way it is. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you next week.
Take care. See you tomorrow, Ron.
See you in the morning, Mike.
Bye-bye.